David Chen was having the kind of day that made him feel invincible. Standing in the glass-walled conference room on the 15th floor of his own building, he watched the city spread out beneath him like a kingdom he'd conquered. Across the mahogany table sat investors from 3 different countries, and they were about to sign a deal worth $50 million. $50 million. The number made his heart race even after all these years of success. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. Riverside Elementary School. His daughter Sophie's school. David frowned and silenced it. Not now. This deal had taken 6 months to put together. Whatever the school wanted could wait 20 minutes. His phone buzzed again. Same number. He declined the call and turned his attention back to the papers being passed around the table. 3 floors below. In those same hallways David walked through every morning without really seeing them. Rosa Martinez pushed her cleaning cart toward the executive wing. Her shift would end in an hour, and she still had the West Corridor to finish. Rosa had worked at Chen Tech for almost 2 years now. Always the early morning shift, always invisible to the people in expensive suits who rushed past her. She didn't mind being invisible. The job paid better than her last one, and she needed every dollar. Rosa emptied a trash bin near the elevators, her mind on her son's upcoming birthday. 13 years old. How had that happened? She was mentally calculating whether she could afford the basketball shoes he wanted when she heard the commotion from the lobby below. Voices raised. Someone crying. Rosa hesitated, then moved toward the railing to look down. In the marble lobby near the fountain that David had imported from Italy, his wife Jennifer had just arrived to pick up Sophie from the company daycare. Jennifer looked perfect as always. Designer dress, perfect hair, the kind of woman who turned heads in grocery stores, but she felt far from perfect. Her head was pounding. The world seemed to tilt slightly to the left. She'd been feeling off all week but ignored it, the way she ignored most things that didn't fit into her carefully scheduled life. Jennifer reached for the column beside her, trying to steady herself. Her vision blurred at the edges. She remembered thinking how stupid it would be to faint in public, how embarrassing, and then her legs simply gave up. She didn't feel herself hit the ground. Didn't hear the sound of her designer bag spilling its contents across the polished floor. Didn't hear her 7-year-old daughter start screaming. Sophie had been holding her mother's hand, chattering about something that happened at daycare, when suddenly her mom's hand went limp and she was falling. The little girl watched her mother collapse like someone had cut invisible strings. For a second, Sophie just stood there frozen, her brain unable to process what her eyes were seeing. Then reality hit her like cold water. "Mommy?" Her voice came out small and scared. "Mommy, get up." Jennifer didn't move. She lay there on the cold marble, one arm twisted under her, her eyes closed, her face pale. Sophie's scream cut through the lobby like a knife. "Help, somebody help! Mom's not moving!" The security guard was at the far entrance dealing with a delivery truck that had parked in the wrong spot. The receptionist had headphones on, deep in a phone call with a difficult client. The lobby was huge and mostly empty at this time of afternoon. Sophie looked around wildly, tears streaming down her face, and saw only one person nearby, a woman in a green uniform emptying a trash can. Rosa heard the scream and saw the child, saw the woman on the ground. She didn't think. She just moved. The cleaning cart clattered as she abandoned it, running toward them, her shoes squeaking on the marble. She reached them in seconds and dropped to her knees beside Jennifer. "Please." Sophie grabbed Rosa's arm, her small fingers digging in desperately. "Please help my mom. She's not moving. She won't wake up." Rosa's mind clicked into emergency mode. She'd raised 3 kids, mostly on her own. She'd dealt with fevers, falls, accidents, the kind of chaos that comes with being a single mom working 2 jobs. She checked Jennifer's neck for a pulse. Found it weak but there. She gently rolled Jennifer onto her side, making sure her airway was clear, while pulling out her phone with her other hand. 911. What's your emergency? A woman collapsed at Chen Technologies on 5th Avenue. She's breathing but unconscious. We need an ambulance right away. Rosa's voice was steady even though her heart was hammering. She kept one hand on Jennifer's wrist, monitoring her pulse while looking at Sophie. The little girl was shaking, her face white with terror. "Hey, sweetheart, look at me." Rosa spoke gently. "What's your name?" "Sophie," the girl whispered. "Sophie, I'm Rosa. Your mom is going to be okay. The ambulance is coming. But I need you to be brave for me, okay? Can you do that?" Rosa held out her hand, and Sophie grabbed it like a lifeline. You're doing great. You were so smart to call for help. The 911 operator was asking questions. When did she collapse? Is she breathing? Any visible injuries? Rosa answered clearly while never letting go of Sophie's hand. She pulled off her work jacket and placed it under Jennifer's head. She spoke in soft, calm tones to both the unconscious woman and her terrified daughter. The receptionist finally noticed something was wrong and came running. Security appeared. Suddenly there were people everywhere, but Rosa didn't move. She stayed right there on the marble floor, holding Sophie, keeping watch over Jennifer, her knees starting to ache but not caring. 6 minutes later, the paramedics burst through the glass doors. 6 minutes that felt like 6 hours. They moved fast, checking vitals, asking questions, loading Jennifer onto a stretcher. Rosa gave them the information she'd gathered. Age approximately, pulse rate, breathing pattern, time of collapse. The paramedics worked with practiced efficiency while Sophie clung to Rosa like she was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly become terrifying. Upstairs, David finally finished his deal. Handshakes all around, smiles, congratulations. He felt like a champion. He was pulling out his phone to check those missed calls when his assistant burst into the room, her face pale. Mr. Chen, you need to come downstairs. Now, it's your wife. The elevator ride down was the longest of David's life. When the doors opened, he saw chaos. Paramedics, his daughter crying, and Jennifer on a stretcher being wheeled toward the ambulance. He ran, his expensive shoes slipping on the marble. What happened? Jennifer, Sophie! He reached them, breathless, his mind trying to catch up with his eyes. Daddy! Sophie turned and he saw she was holding hands with someone. A woman in a green uniform. One of the cleaning staff. Rosa, her name tag said. Sir, we need to go. The paramedic was firm. Your wife has suffered some kind of cardiac event. We're taking her to Memorial Hospital. Cardiac event. The words didn't make sense. Jennifer was 34. She ran marathons. She couldn't have heart problems. This had to be a mistake. I'm coming with you, David said, moving toward the ambulance. Daddy, no. Don't leave Rosa. Sophie's grip tightened on the cleaning woman's hand. She has to come too. Please, I need her. The paramedic looked at Rosa, then at the hysterical child. Ma'am, if you could ride along to keep the little girl calm, it would help. Rosa glanced at her abandoned cleaning cart, at her supervisor who had appeared in the crowd. She should say no. She should get back to work. But Sophie's tear-stained face looked up at her with such desperate trust that there was really no choice at all. Okay, sweetheart. I'm coming. I'm right here. And so they climbed into the ambulance together. The CEO, the unconscious woman, the terrified little girl, and the janitor, nobody had ever really noticed. As the sirens wailed and the ambulance pulled away from the building, David looked at his daughter holding the stranger's hand, like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. He looked at the woman who had been cleaning his floors for 2 years, who he'd walked past 100 times without seeing, and something cracked deep in his chest. His perfect day. His perfect deal. His perfect life. All of it suddenly felt as fragile as his wife lying motionless on the stretcher between them. The emergency room at Memorial Hospital smelled like disinfectant and fear. David stood in the middle of it all, feeling completely useless. Doctors and nurses rushed Jennifer away the moment they arrived, leaving him in a waiting area with fluorescent lights that made everything look harsh and unreal. Sophie refused to let go of Rosa's hand. A doctor appeared, clipboard in hand, asking rapid-fire questions. What medications was Jennifer taking? Any history of heart disease? When was her last physical? What's her primary care physician's name? David opened his mouth and realized with creeping horror that he didn't know the answers. He didn't know what pills his wife took. He couldn't remember the last time she'd mentioned seeing a doctor. He'd been too busy building his company to notice those details. I'm not sure, he admitted, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. My wife handles all that. The doctor's expression didn't change, but David felt the judgment anyway. What kind of husband doesn't know his wife's medical history? The kind who works 70-hour weeks and considers it success. The kind who thinks providing money means providing everything. Mr. Chen, we need this information to treat your wife properly. The doctor's voice was professional but urgent. Is there anyone else we can ask? Rosa spoke up from the plastic chair where she sat with Sophie. Doctor, I ask. Ed Mrs. Chen some questions while we were waiting for the ambulance. Let me check my phone. She pulled out an old smartphone with a cracked screen and scrolled through her notes. She told me she takes blood pressure medication. Lisinopril, I think she said. And something for anxiety. She mentioned her doctor's name, too. Dr. Patricia Morrison at City Medical Center. She said she felt dizzy earlier this week but thought it was just stress. The doctor took notes quickly. Thank you. That's helpful. This might be a drug interaction or an underlying condition. We're running tests now. He looked at David. Your wife is stable, but we need to do a full cardiac workup. It's going to take several hours. Several hours. David nodded numbly. The doctor left, and David stood there feeling like a stranger in his own life. This cleaning woman knew more about his wife's condition than he did. She'd had the presence of mind to ask questions, to gather information, while he was closing business deals. The realization sat in his stomach like a stone. Daddy, I'm scared. Sophie's voice was small. She still held Rosa's hand like it was the only thing keeping her from drowning. David went to his daughter and knelt down, trying to hug her. But Sophie pulled away. Where were you? I called the school and they said they couldn't reach you. Why didn't you answer? I was in a meeting, sweetheart. I'm sorry. I didn't know this was happening. You're always in meetings, Sophie said, and the simple truth of it hit David harder than any accusation. His 7-year-old daughter barely knew him. He was the man who came home after bedtime and left before breakfast. The man who sent gifts instead of showing up. The man who thought money could replace presents. Rosa spoke gently. Sophie, your daddy is here now. And your mom is getting help from really good doctors. How about we find you something to eat? I bet you're hungry. I don't want to eat. I want my mom. But Sophie's stomach growled, betraying her. Tell you what, Rosa said. Let's go to the cafeteria and get some crackers. Just something small. We can bring them back here. Your dad will stay right here in case the doctor comes back. Right, Mr. Chen? David nodded, grateful for someone who seemed to know what to do. I'll be right here. I promise. Rosa and Sophie walked hand in hand down the corridor, leaving David alone with his thoughts. He looked around the waiting room at other families in crisis. A young man pacing by the window. An elderly couple holding hands in silence. A woman crying softly into her phone. All of them trapped in that terrible space between before and after, where everything hangs in balance. His phone rang. The investor from Japan. David stared at the screen and let it ring. Another call came immediately after. His CFO, then his assistant. The business world that had seemed so important 3 hours ago now felt distant and hollow. What did any of it matter if Jennifer didn't wake up? What good was $50 million if he lost his wife? 20 minutes later, Rosa and Sophie returned with a small bag of crackers and 2 bottles of water. Sophie looked calmer, her face washed, her hair pulled back. Rosa had that gift some people have of making things feel okay even when they're not. Any news? Rosa asked, sitting down and handing David a bottle of water he didn't remember asking for. Not yet. David took a sip and realized he was thirsty. Thank you for everything. I don't even know where to start thanking you. Rosa shook her head. You don't need to thank me. Anyone would have done the same. But David knew that wasn't true. In his world, people stepped over the homeless on their way to expensive lunches. They fired employees by email. They saw service workers as furniture. Would any of his business associates have stopped to help? Or would they have stepped around the problem and called someone else to deal with it? How did you know what to do? He asked. The way you handled everything. You were so calm. Rosa smiled slightly. I have 3 kids. 2 boys and a girl. When you're a single mom working 2 jobs, you learn to handle emergencies. My youngest, he fell off a jungle gym when he was 5. Broke his arm. I had to stay calm for him even though I was terrified inside. You learn that kids need to see you in control even when you're not. 2 jobs? David heard himself ask. I clean your building in the mornings. Then I work at a grocery store most evenings. It's how I make ends meet. David did the math in his head. If she worked his building from 6 to 2, then the grocery store from 3 to 9, that was 15 hours a day. When do you sleep? When I can. Rosa said it matter-of-factly without self-pity. My kids are older now, so that helps. My daughter, she's 16. She helps with dinner and homework for the boys. We make it work. David thought about his own house with 7 bedrooms, most of them empty. Thought about paying people to cook, clean, garden, everything. He'd built an empire, but somehow this woman working 2 minimum-wage jobs was richer than him in ways that actually mattered. She had time for her kids. She knew how to help in a crisis. She was present in her own life. Sophie had fallen asleep against Rosa's shoulder, exhausted from fear and crying. Rosa adjusted her position gently so the little girl would be comfortable. The gesture was so natural, so loving, that David felt his throat tighten. When was the last time Sophie had fallen asleep in his arms? When was the last time he'd read her a bedtime story or helped with homework or just sat with her doing nothing? "Can I ask you something?" David said quietly. "Do you like working at Chentech?" Rosa considered the question carefully. "The pay is fair. My supervisor is decent. The work is fine." "That's not what I asked." Rosa met his eyes. "You want the truth, Mr. Chen?" "Most days I'm invisible. People walk right past me like I'm part of the furniture. Sometimes they leave their trash on the floor instead of walking 3 feet to a bin, like picking up after themselves is beneath them. I've heard executives make jokes about the cleaning staff. Not mean jokes exactly, but the kind that make it clear they don't see us as real people with real lives." The words should have made David defensive, but they didn't. They made him ashamed. How many times had he walked past Rosa without acknowledging her? How many times had he left coffee cups sitting on his desk for someone else to deal with? He'd never been cruel, but he'd been thoughtless, which might be worse. "I'm sorry," he said. "I've been one of those people." "You've never been rude to me, Mr. Chen. But you've never really seen me either." "Not until today." Rosa paused. "Can I tell you something? My oldest son, he wants to go to college. He's smart. Really smart. But we can't afford it. Not even community college. He works at a fast food place after school to help with bills. I see him doing homework at midnight, and I think about all the things he could be if we just had a little more. If people like him had a real chance." Before David could respond, the doctor returned. His expression was serious but not tragic. "Mr. Chen, your wife is stable. We've identified the problem. She has an underlying heart condition that was exacerbated by stress and a dangerous interaction between her medications. She needs surgery, but she's going to be okay." David felt his knees go weak with relief. "Can I see her?" "She's being prepped for surgery now. It'll be about 6 hours. We'll update you regularly." The doctor glanced at Rosa, holding sleeping Sophie. "Is this grandmother?" "No, she's—" David started to say "our janitor" and realized how wrong that sounded. "How insufficient." "She's family." Rosa looked surprised but didn't correct him. The doctor nodded and left. David sat down heavily in the chair across from Rosa and Sophie. 6 more hours. 6 hours of not knowing. 6 hours to sit in this waiting room and think about all the ways he'd been getting life wrong. "Mr. Chen," Rosa said softly, "you should call someone. Family, friends, someone who can be here with you." David pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Hundreds of names. Business associates, investors, country club members. He couldn't think of a single person he wanted to call. Not one person he trusted with this kind of vulnerability. He'd built a network, but not a community. He had contacts, but not friends. "There's no one," he admitted quietly. Rosa shifted Sophie gently. "What about your parents?" "My father and I don't speak much. We had a falling out years ago about the business. My mother died when I was in college." David looked at his phone like it was a foreign object. "I always thought I was successful. I built this company from nothing. I made millions. But sitting here right now, I can't think of one person who would drop everything to be here with me. Not one real friend." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest. David watched Rosa gently stroke Sophie's hair while his daughter slept. This stranger showed his child more tenderness than he'd managed in months. This woman who cleaned toilets for a living understood things about dignity and kindness that he'd forgotten in his climb to the top. "You know what's funny?" David said. "Not funny, haha. Funny strange. Today I closed a $50 million deal. Biggest of my career. I was on top of the world. Now none of it seems real. None of it matters." "It matters," Rosa said. "Money isn't evil, Mr. Chen. My life would be easier with more of it. But money is a tool, not a destination. The question is what you build with it." Sophie stirred and woke up, disoriented. "Daddy, is Mom okay?" "The doctor says she's going to be fine, sweetheart. She needs surgery, but she'll be okay." Sophie started crying again, but this time from relief. David finally got to hold his daughter. Feeling how small she was, how fragile, how precious. She cried into his shoulder while Rosa watched with understanding eyes. This woman had probably held her own children through hundreds of crises, had probably been both mother and father, had probably sacrificed in ways David couldn't imagine. As the afternoon stretched into evening, the three of them waited together. Rosa told stories to keep Sophie distracted. David ordered food from the cafeteria that no one really ate. They watched the clock and tried not to think about what was happening in that operating room. And slowly, David began to understand that this day, this terrible, frightening day, might be the beginning of something. A crack in his carefully constructed world. A chance to see clearly for the first time in years. A moment when a janitor had saved more than just his wife's life. She'd held up a mirror, and David Chen didn't like what he saw reflected there. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to become someone different, someone better, someone his daughter would want to know. Jennifer's surgery was successful, but the recovery would be long. The doctors explained it in terms David barely understood. Lifestyle changes, stress reduction, constant monitoring for the first few months, medication adjustments, physical therapy. His wife would need help with everything from getting dressed to climbing stairs. She couldn't drive. She couldn't be alone. She couldn't go back to the life she'd been living. David hired the best private nurses money could buy. They arrived at the hospital with credentials from top medical schools, professional demeanors, and absolutely no connection with his daughter. Sophie took one look at the first nurse, a competent woman named Patricia, and started crying. "I don't want her. I want Rosa." Sophie clutched her stuffed rabbit and looked at her father with betrayed eyes. "Where's Rosa? You promised she'd stay." David hadn't promised that exactly, but he understood what his daughter meant. Rosa had been there through the worst hours of their lives. She'd held Sophie's hand when the world fell apart. She was safety in human form. "Sweetheart, Rosa has her own job, her own family. She can't stay with us all the time." "Then I don't want anyone." Sophie was working herself up to a full tantrum, and David didn't blame her. She'd watched her mother collapse, spent terrifying hours in a hospital, and now her father wanted to hand her over to a stranger, even a kind stranger with excellent credentials. Rosa had stayed at the hospital far longer than she needed to. Her supervisor had called twice. She'd missed her grocery store shift entirely, which meant missing a day's pay she couldn't afford to lose. But every time she tried to leave, Sophie would panic, and Rosa, despite her own problems, couldn't walk away from a scared little girl. That evening, after Jennifer was moved to a recovery room and Sophie had finally cried herself to sleep in a chair, David found Rosa in the hallway. She was on her phone, speaking rapid Spanish, and she sounded stressed. When she saw him, she ended the call quickly. "Mr. Chen, sorry, I was just checking in with my daughter. Please, call me David. After everything you've done, I think we're past formalities." He paused, trying to figure out how to say what he needed to say. "I have a proposal for you. Please hear me out before you say no." Rosa looked wary but nodded. "Sophie needs someone familiar while Jennifer recovers. The doctors say my wife will need constant care for at least 6 weeks, maybe longer. My daughter is traumatized. She won't accept the nurses I've hired, and honestly, I don't blame her. She trusts you." David took a breath. "I'd like to hire you as Sophie's caregiver. Full-time for as long as you're willing. I'll pay you 10 times what you make now." "Both jobs combined," Rosa's eyes widened. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. David could see her doing the math in her head, and he knew what 10 times her salary meant to someone in her position. It meant security. It meant her son could go to college. It meant she wouldn't have to work herself into exhaustion every day. "Mr. Chen, I don't know anything about being a professional caregiver. You know how to help people. You know how to stay calm in a crisis. You know how to make my daughter feel safe. That's what we need." David surprised himself by meaning every word. "I'm not asking you to be a servant. I'm asking you to help my family through a difficult time." "What about my job at Chentech? My position at the grocery store? The people who depend on me? I'll make sure your supervisor finds a replacement. I'll personally ensure that replacement is paid fairly and treated well. As for the grocery store, you'd be giving notice anyway if you took this job." "Rosa, I'm not trying to take advantage of you. I'm asking for help, real help, the kind you already gave us." Rosa was quiet for a long moment. "Can I think about it? Talk to my kids? Of course. Take all the time you need." But even as David said it, he knew time was a luxury they didn't have. Jennifer was coming home in 3 days. Sophie needed stability now. He was asking Rosa to make a life-changing decision while she was exhausted and worried about her own family. It wasn't fair, but very little about this situation was fair. Rosa went home that night to her small apartment in a neighborhood David had never visited. She sat at the kitchen table with her 3 children and laid out the situation. The money would change everything. Her daughter Anna could focus on school instead of working part-time. Her sons could have new clothes, proper school supplies, maybe even music lessons like they'd always wanted. But her oldest son, 15-year-old Miguel, asked the question that mattered. "Mom, do you want to do this? Or do you just want the money?" Rosa thought about that. Thought about Sophie's tear-stained face and David's lost expression. Thought about Jennifer lying in that hospital bed, vulnerable and scared. Thought about how money wasn't everything, but it was something, and her family needed something desperately. "I think I want to help them," she said slowly. "That little girl has been through something terrible, and I think maybe I can make a difference. But I'm worried about you 3, about being away from home more." Anna, 16 and wise beyond her years, put her hand on her mother's. "Mom, you've sacrificed everything for us. Let us sacrifice a little for you. We'll be fine. You should take this job." The next morning, Rosa called David. "I'll do it, but I have conditions." "Name them." "First, my evenings are for my family. I'll work from 7 in the morning until 6 at night, but after that, I go home to my kids unless it's an emergency. Second, I want 2 Sundays off every month. Third, if I see something wrong with how your family works, I'm going to say so. I won't be rude, but I won't be quiet either. If you're hiring me to help Sophie, then I need to be honest about what she needs, even if you don't like hearing it." David was quiet for a moment. No one talked to him like that. No one set conditions when he made an offer. His first instinct was to be offended, but then he realized that's exactly what he needed. Someone who would tell him the truth instead of what he wanted to hear. "Agreed. All of it. When can you start?" "Tomorrow. But I need to ask you something first. Why are you doing this? You could hire a trained nanny with degrees and certifications." "Why me?" David thought about the question. "Because in the worst moment of my life, you were the only person who knew what to do. Because my daughter trusts you. Because you're real in a way most people in my life aren't. Because I think maybe you can teach us how to be a family again." The honesty surprised them both. Jennifer came home to a house that felt different. Rosa had moved into the guest house, a small cottage in the backyard that David had bought but never used. She'd set up a comfortable space for herself and immediately made herself essential. She helped Jennifer with medication schedules, physical therapy exercises, and the 100 small tasks that become mountains when you're recovering from surgery. But more than that, Rosa brought normalcy. She cooked real food in the kitchen that had only ever seen catering staff. She insisted on family dinners, even if Jennifer was too tired to eat much. She made David come home at a reasonable hour, simply by calling and saying "Sophie needs you" in a tone that didn't allow for arguments. The first week was an adjustment. David wasn't used to being told what to do in his own home. When Rosa knocked on his study door at 7:30 one evening and said, "Sophie is having a hard time tonight. She needs her father," David started to say he had an important call with Beijing. Rosa just looked at him. Didn't argue. Didn't plead. Just looked at him with those eyes that had seen too much struggle to be impressed by business calls. David hung up on Beijing and went to his daughter's room. Sophie was sitting on her bed clutching her rabbit, tears streaming silently down her face. "Daddy, what if Mom gets sick again? What if next time the doctors can't help her?" David sat beside her and pulled her close, feeling how much he'd missed this. "Your mom is getting better every day. The doctors fixed what was wrong. She's going to be okay. You don't know that. You can't promise that." And David realized his daughter was right. He couldn't promise that. He couldn't control this the way he controlled business deals. "You're right. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. But I can promise I'll be here. I can promise you won't face scary things alone. I can promise I'll try harder to be the dad you deserve." Sophie looked up at him. "Will you read to me? Like you used to when I was little?" David hadn't read to his daughter in over a year. Edith. Or gotten she even liked it. "What do you want to hear?" They read together for an hour, and when Sophie finally fell asleep, David stayed sitting on her bed watching her breathe. Rosa had been right to interrupt his call. This mattered more than Beijing. This mattered more than everything. Over the next few weeks, Rosa kept pushing, gently but firmly. When Jennifer expressed feeling useless and depressed, Rosa didn't coddle her. She handed her a vegetable peeler and said, "You can sit at the table and help with dinner. Your hands work fine." When David tried to buy Sophie an expensive new toy to make up for his absence, Rosa stopped him in the store. "She doesn't need more stuff, Mr. Chen. She needs your time." "That's free. Don't call me Mr. Chen, it's David." "Fine, David, your daughter has a room full of toys she doesn't play with." "You know what she asked me yesterday?" "She asked if you were going to leave because her mom is sick. That's what's on her mind. Not toys." The words hit like a punch. "Why would she think I'd leave?" "Because you're never home. Because even when you are home, you're on your phone or your computer. Because she's 7 years old and she doesn't understand that you're working to provide for her. She just knows her daddy is always somewhere else." David wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Because Rosa was right. He'd been physically present lately, but mentally absent. Still checking stocks. Still answering emails. Still halfway in his office even when he sat at the dinner table. "How do I fix that?" he asked, and it was the most vulnerable question he'd asked in years. "You just decide to. You put the phone away. You be where you are. Not where you wish you were or where you think you should be. You be here now." It sounded simple. It was the hardest thing David had ever tried to do. But he tried. He started leaving his phone in his study during dinner. He scheduled meetings around Sophie's bedtime instead of the other way around. He took her to the park on Saturday mornings. He asked Jennifer about her day and actually listened to the answer. He learned his wife's doctor's name, her medication schedule, her favorite coffee order. He learned his daughter's best friend's name, her favorite color, what made her laugh, and Rosa watched it all with quiet approval. She pushed when she needed to push and supported when support was needed. She treated Jennifer with dignity, never making her feel helpless. She gave Sophie structure and love without trying to replace her parents. She challenged David without attacking him. One evening, about a month after Jennifer came home, the family sat down to dinner together. Actually together. No phones, no distractions. Just 4 people eating Rosa's homemade enchiladas and talking about their day. Sophie told a story about school. Jennifer laughed, actually laughed. David realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd heard his wife laugh. After Sophie went to bed, David found Rosa cleaning up the kitchen. "You don't have to do that. We have a cleaning service that comes in." "I know. I like doing it. Keeps my hands busy." Rosa rinsed a plate. "Your family is getting better, David. Did you notice?" He had noticed. The house felt different, warmer, more alive. "It's because of you." "No, it's because you're trying. I'm just holding up a mirror." Rosa dried her hands and turned to face him. "Can I tell you something? That first day in the hospital, when Sophie was crying and you didn't know what to do, I thought you were just another rich man who'd forgotten how to be human. But I was wrong. You hadn't forgotten. You'd just gotten lost. There's a difference." "I'm still lost," David admitted, "but maybe less lost than before. That's all any of us can do. Get a little less lost every day." David thought about his company, about the hundreds of people who worked there, about how many of them were invisible to him the way Rosa had been. Thought about systems that kept people poor and grateful for scraps. Thought about how easily he could change things if he just decided to. If he just chose to see people instead of walking past them. "Rosa, I want to change things at Chen Tech. The way employees are treated. The pay structure. The benefits. But I don't know where to start," Rosa smiled. "Start by asking them what they need. Not what you think they need. What they actually need. And then listen to the answer." It seemed so simple. So obvious. So revolutionary. David called an emergency board meeting for the following Tuesday. He'd spent the weekend going through company files, looking at employee records with fresh eyes. What he found made him sick. Starting wages that barely covered rent in the city. Health insurance so expensive that most lower-level employees couldn't afford it. Sick leave policies that punished people for being human. Promotion tracks that were theoretical at best and non-existent at worst. The boardroom fell silent when he presented his proposal. Health insurance for every employee, fully covered. Living wages that actually let people live with dignity. Paid sick leave. Educational grants for employees who wanted to advance. Diversity initiatives that would actively recruit and promote people from the very communities Chen Tech had been ignoring for years. His CFO, Richard, was the first to speak. "David, this would cost us millions, plural. Our profit margins would take a significant hit." "We can afford it," David said calmly. "Our profit margins are already obscene. We made $300 million last year. We can spare some of that to treat people like human beings." "This is business, not charity," another board member said. "Shareholders won't stand for it." Then we'll get new shareholders. People who understand that a company has responsibilities beyond quarterly earnings. The room erupted, board members talking over each other. Some supportive but nervous, most angry. David's oldest investor, a man named Harold, who'd been with him since the beginning, stood up. "David, I've known you for 15 years. I believed in you when nobody else would. I put millions into this company when it was just an idea. But this?" He gestured at the presentation. "This is naive. This is business suicide. You're letting emotion cloud your judgment." "No," David said quietly. "I'm letting humanity guide my judgment. There's a difference. Is this about that cleaning woman? The one who helped your wife?" Harold's tone was dismissive. "Look, it's admirable that you're grateful. Give her a bonus. Donate to a charity in her name. But don't destroy what we've built because you're feeling guilty." David felt his jaw clench. "Her name is Rosa, and she didn't just help my wife. She showed me that we've built this company on the backs of people we refuse to see as fully human. That ends now. Then it ends without me." Harold gathered his papers. "I'm pulling my investment, and I won't be the only one." He wasn't. Over the next week, 3 major investors withdrew. The stock price dropped 15%. Business news sites ran articles questioning David's leadership. Competitors smelled blood in the water and started circling. Other CEOs called not to support him, but to offer condescending advice about keeping emotions out of business decisions. David's father called. They hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since David had refused to lay off workers during a merger. "I heard what you're doing," his father said without preamble. "It's embarrassing. You're making yourself look weak. You're making the family look weak." "I'm trying to do the right thing, Dad." "The right thing?" His father laughed, bitter and sharp. "The right thing is to win. To dominate. To be strong. I didn't raise you to be soft." "No," David said. "You raised me to be you. And I've realized that's the last thing I want to be." He hung up before his father could respond, sat in his study with his head in his hands. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe he was destroying everything he'd built. Maybe emotion was clouding his judgment. Maybe he was being naive. Rosa found him there an hour later. "Your assistant let me in. She said you were having a rough day." "I'm probably destroying my company," David said without looking up. "Investors are leaving. Stock is dropping. Everyone thinks I've lost my mind." Rosa sat down across from him. "Have you?" "I don't know, maybe. Is it crazy to want to treat people with basic dignity?" "In your world?" "Apparently, yes." Rosa's tone was matter-of-fact. "But that doesn't mean you're wrong. It means the world is wrong. I could lose everything. Everything money-wise? Maybe. But you'd still have Jennifer. Still have Sophie. Still have yourself. That's not nothing." Rosa leaned forward. "David, can I tell you about my mother?" She worked in factories in Mexico her whole life. Terrible conditions. Terrible pay. She got sick from the chemicals and couldn't afford treatment. She died when she was 54. 54 years old and worked to death for companies that never saw her as human. Rosa's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "When I came to this country, I promised myself I'd build a better life. And I did, sort of. But I've worked for so many companies that treated me exactly like those factories treated my mother. Like I'm replaceable. Like my humanity doesn't matter. Like the only thing about me that has value is my labor." She paused. "Then you offered me this job, and yeah, it was about money. But then you started actually changing. Started seeing people. Started trying. And now you want to make your whole company better, even though it might cost you everything. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how much that matters?" "It matters if it works," David said. "If it destroys the company, it helps no one. Maybe, or maybe it starts something. Maybe other companies see it's possible. Maybe you prove that doing right can also be good business. Or maybe you fail spectacularly and at least you failed trying to do something good." There was a knock on the study door. Jennifer, stronger now but still moving carefully, came in with Sophie. His wife looked worried. "Your assistant said the meeting didn't go well." David explained the situation. The investors leaving. The falling stock price. The criticism. Jennifer listened quietly, then surprised him. "Good," she said. "Good? David, do you remember why you started this company? You wanted to build something different. Something better. Somewhere along the way you forgot that. You became just another CEO chasing profits." Jennifer sat down beside him. "This thing with Rosa, with me getting sick, it woke you up. Don't go back to sleep because it's scary." I could lose the company entirely. Then we'll figure it out. We have savings. We have each other. We have what actually matters. Jennifer took his hand. I almost died, David. And you know what I thought about in that ambulance? Not our house. Not our cars. Not our stock portfolio. I thought about Sophie. I thought about you. I thought about all the time I'd wasted on things that didn't matter. Don't waste any more time. Sophie climbed into David's lap. Daddy, are you sad? A little bit, sweetheart. Rosa says being sad is okay. She says sometimes you have to feel bad things so you know what good things feel like. Sophie hugged him. I think you're brave. Why? Because Rosa told me you're trying to help people even though it's hard. That's what brave means. David looked at the three of them. His wife who'd almost died. His daughter who'd almost lost her mother. This woman who'd saved them both and then saved him from himself. They all believed in what he was trying to do. Maybe that was enough, but the storm wasn't over. The next few weeks were brutal. More investors left. Competitors started poaching clients, claiming Chentech was financially unstable. Employees were nervous about their jobs. Ironically, the exact opposite of what David was trying to achieve. His assistant quit, saying she didn't want to be part of a sinking ship. Then Rosa did something unexpected. She called a meeting with the service staff. Janitors, security, cafeteria workers, maintenance. People who'd never been asked for input on anything. She stood in front of them in the basement break room and told them what David was trying to do. Mr. Chen wants to make this a better place to work. Better pay, better benefits, real opportunities. But some powerful people don't want that to happen. They think we're not worth the investment. They think we're disposable. Rosa's voice was strong. I want you to know that one person sees us. One person is fighting for us. And I think we should fight for him. A security guard named Thomas spoke up. What can we do? We're nobody. That's exactly what they want us to think, Rosa said. But we're the people who keep this building running. We're the ones who know every corner of this company. And we have stories. Stories about what it's like to work here. Stories that need to be told. Rosa helped them organize testimonials, videos, and written statements about their experiences. The guard who couldn't afford his daughter's asthma medication. The janitor who'd worked there for 10 years and never gotten a raise. The cafeteria worker who had 2 degrees but couldn't get promoted because she didn't have connections. They shared these stories on social media. They reached out to local news stations. They made themselves visible in a way they never had been before. And something shifted. Customers started paying attention. Other companies' employees started asking questions. The narrative changed from CEO makes risky financial decision to workers demand dignity. A local news station ran a segment. Rosa was interviewed, articulate and passionate. She talked about David's proposed changes, but also about the larger issue, about how the economy was built on treating some people as less valuable than others, about how that needed to change, about how one CEO was trying to prove it could. The segment went viral. Suddenly, Chentech wasn't a cautionary tale about bleeding heart leadership. It was a test case. Could a company treat workers well and still succeed? People wanted to know. Business schools started debating it. Politicians mentioned it. Other CEOs quietly started reaching out to David asking how he planned to make the numbers work. And then something wonderful happened. A different kind of investor emerged. Younger people. Impact investors. Funds that measured success in more than just quarterly profits. They saw what David was trying to do and wanted to be part of it. The money didn't flood back all at once, but it trickled in steadily. Enough to stabilize. Enough to move forward. 3 months after the catastrophic board meeting, David stood in front of his employees. All of them, from executives to the newest janitor. He announced the changes were being implemented. Health insurance for everyone, effective immediately. Wage increases starting next pay period. Educational programs launching next quarter. The applause was deafening. People were crying. Thomas, the security guard, shook David's hand so hard it hurt. Rosa stood in the back, smiling quietly, and David caught her eye. She nodded once. Approval. Pride. Acknowledgement that he'd done what he said he'd do even when it nearly destroyed him. But David knew it wasn't over. The real work was just beginning. Culture change didn't happen with one announcement. Trust had to be earned daily. He'd have to prove over and over that this wasn't a publicity stunt, that he meant it, that people mattered more than profits even when profits were on the line. That evening, back home, Jennifer was strong enough to cook dinner with Rosa. Sophie helped, standing on a step stool to reach the counter. David came into the kitchen and just watched them for a moment. His wife laughing, his daughter focused on cutting vegetables carefully, Rosa guiding them both with patient hands. This was success. Not the boardroom, not the stock price, this family connection. People who saw each other as fully human. It had taken almost losing everything to understand that. And David knew with absolute certainty that he'd make the same choice again. Every time, no matter the cost, because Rosa was right. Money wasn't everything, but humanity was. And finally, after all these years, he was learning to be human again. 6 months after Jennifer collapsed in that lobby, Chen Tech looked completely different. Not the building itself, though even that had changed with better break rooms and comfortable spaces for all employees. The real difference was invisible, but everywhere. People smiled in the hallways. Janitors had conversations with executives. The invisible walls between different levels of workers had started to crumble. David promoted Rosa to Director of Employee Welfare, a position that didn't exist until he created it specifically for her. Some board members questioned whether someone without a college degree should hold such a role. David's response was simple. She has a PhD in human dignity. That's the qualification that matters, Rosa initially protested. David, I clean floors. I don't have business experience, you have life experience. You understand what workers need because you've been a worker. You know what it's like to choose between groceries and rent. You know what dignity looks like and what humiliation feels like. That's worth more than any MBA. On her first day in her new role, Rosa walked through the building with fresh eyes, not as the invisible janitor, but as someone with authority to change things. She noticed the little indignities that added up. The way the executive cafeteria had real plates while the staff cafeteria used disposables. The way some bathrooms were renovated and beautiful while others were dingy and neglected. The way parking spots near the entrance were reserved for titles rather than need. She made a list, brought it to David. This is going to sound petty. Tell me, why do vice presidents get reserved parking while a single mom working in the mailroom has to park 3 blocks away in an unsecured lot? Why do executives get catered lunches while staff have to pack sandwiches? Why does the company newsletter only feature management achievements and never highlight the people who actually keep this place running? David looked at the list, felt shame creep up his neck. You're right. These aren't small things. They're symbols of how we value people differently based on their job title. So what are we going to do about it? They changed it all. Reserved parking became first come, first served, with spaces closest to the entrance designated for people with disabilities or families with young children. The executive cafeteria was eliminated, and all employees ate in the same space with the same quality food. The company newsletter started featuring employee spotlights regardless of position. And suddenly everyone got to read about Thomas the security guard's volunteer work, or Maria from accounting's marathon training. The changes seemed small, but they mattered enormously. People noticed, people felt seen, and productivity increased not because workers were being squeezed harder, but because they actually cared about the company they worked for. Rosa also developed mentorship programs. Executives were paired with service workers, not in a condescending way, but as equals learning from each other. A CFO was paired with a janitor who turned out to have brilliant ideas about waste reduction. A marketing director learned about customer service from a cafeteria worker who'd been watching people for years. The program broke down assumptions on both sides. Other companies started paying attention. Business magazines that had mocked David 6 months ago were now writing feature articles about Chen Tech's revolutionary approach. Though,